It gives me great pleasure to welcome our keynote speaker. She is an acting director of the University College of Communication and Media Sciences. She began her academic career as a professor at the Ohio State University. She has served as director of School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Kent State University, and later director of the School of Journalism and Mass Communication at the University of Iowa. She has more than a decade of industry experience in public relations. Please welcome Professor Pamela J. Creedon.
Everyone, thank you very, very much for this opportunity today. I am very honored to be here. Thank you, President Rady. I believe he may have left. Thank you, Dr. Fernandez, very much for the invitation. And also, I truly appreciate Pooja's, and is she? Yes, she's here. All of her time and energy that she spent arranging this for me to come over here and meet with you, including, I think, last night. Yes, thank you. She worked hard to organize the program and to make sure that all of the details were put together. Personally, to come here, I wanted to do some research about Manipal because honestly, I didn't know where it was. I have been to Delhi, I've been to Agra, I've been to Goa, I've been to Mumbai, I've been to Hyderabad, but I didn't know where Manipal was. So I thought I'd better learn a little bit about that before I made my speech today. I learned that man means mud, and Pula means lake. So essentially, Manipal is Mud Lake. Well, here you are in the sea and sand. So there is a nice kind of contrast for you all in terms of a learning curve. You know, I also learned that regional information technology, that is actually, Manipal is a hub for that in the UAE, which is very, very impressive. Excuse me, in India, my apologies, a hub for that. Also, your home campus in India has 28,000 students, which is, again, extremely impressive, from 57 different countries. And 2,500 faculty. I think I learned a little bit earlier today, you have 150 or so students here in this college, and you have some very distinguished faculty because I also looked you all up online to see a little bit about you and your background. And you have different majors here: advertising, comm studies, graphics, journalism, television and video production. Very distinctive, very career-oriented. I'm very impressed. Also, Manipal opened here in Dubai in 2000, so you're 17 years old. And believe it or not, Zayed University, where I'm from right now, is 19 years old, so we're both teenagers here in the UAE, which makes it, I think, a very interesting time for all of us to explore what we need to do in our field of media and mass communication. You're right next door, but I've never been over here. So I truly appreciate this opportunity. Now let me tell you a little bit about ZU and about our College of Communication and Media Sciences. I actually came over here to the UAE in 1998 to actually help Zayed University, UAEU, the University of the United Arab Emirates, to help them build their communication department. It actually, at that time, was only 6 years old, and they were in the process of trying to understand exactly what they needed to do in our discipline. So then several years later, after that experience, I got involved in this idea of creating a new university here in the UAE for women. And that, again, this is part of what you'll see I'm trying to talk about a little bit in terms of my research interests. They had a team of us who came over to the UAE to determine whether or not women needed different colleges in a new university system in the UAE. My area, of course, was communication, and there were a number of other disciplines. So we went around, met with industry leaders, met with others that were possibly going to employ Emirati women. Our university is Emirati female in Dubai, and I will tell you a little bit more, but now we actually have Emirati males also in our campus over in Abu Dhabi. So we were here to research the country's employment needs for nationals, and then to decide what colleges were needed. And literally, my proposal was to Sheikh Nayan, who was then the Minister of Higher Education, and he immediately, after I talked about the need for communication skills and development in the UAE, he said yes, and that was it. We created a new College of Communication and Media Sciences with his yes, and now we have, as I said, the campuses in Abu Dhabi and Dubai with a male campus over in Abu Dhabi. Today, ZU has 8,500 students, 4,000 in Abu Dhabi and 3,500 in Dubai. And we are, in our college, we have nearly 700 majors, probably a few more over in Abu Dhabi than in Dubai. And we have majors in media production and storytelling, integrated stratcom, tourism, and cultural communication. And one of the things that I find very interesting in our college is, believe it or not, we're the only college at Zayed University that requires Arabic. All of the other colleges at this moment do not require students at ZU to take Arabic. We do. We feel that bilingual graduates are the most important career orientation that we could ever imagine. So we are the only college. We have 32 faculty in our college, and they represent, or excuse me, yes, 32 colleges that represent 18 nationalities, which again parallels a little bit your university, which is wonderful. And we're accredited by 2 accrediting agencies, which gives us good, I think, international standing in our field. For my presentation today, Women, Media, and Sport, Challenging Social and Cultural Values, I'd also like to give you a little background about me and my history and why this is my area that I got interested to do some research in. While I am an academic, and this is more of an academic presentation, and you're going to hear some wonderful professional presentations after me, many of you may decide to go into the field and realize your background, your experiences, and your professional career will also affect what you want to do if you decide to become an academic in terms of your research. Well, in my case, my first job was being a public relations director at a U.S. university. At that time, my job was to go out and write a press release about a new phys ed facility we were building, a new gymnasium. It was a huge building, and it had all kinds of different facilities. Well, as I'm walking through the building, I see an area, it's got a ledge, and you look down the ledge, and there were 2 rooms. And so again, I'm writing the news release, PR, so I said, what is this room? And they told me those are handball racquetball courts. I said, oh, I don't know that sport. How do you play it? Well, women don't go in those rooms. That's only for men. So, you don't need to go in and you don't need to see it. I, immediately wanted to know more. And so that also happened to be exactly the time that in the U.S. we passed what was called Title IX, which was the Higher Education Amendments Act, that essentially reads, no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in or denied the benefits of or subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Now remember, this was 1972. We had a brand new gymnasium, and women didn't have access to part of it, and I was the public relations director. So I went and met with the president of the college, and I said, how come? This doesn't make sense, given what's going on today. And he said, well, women can go down and knock on the men's locker room door and ask for permission to go in and see the courts if you want to. I got some faculty wives and some other faculty to go down with me, and we thought it was interesting. So we bought 2 rackets, and usually about 6 of us would go down to the room to see what we should do, and a couple would play and figure out what to do, and the rest of us would have good conversations. Anyway, long story short, after we played for a while, The university, the college then, it's now a university, decided to knock down one of the walls and build us a staircase to go down into these courts without having to go through the men's locker room. The Women's March, I really felt that that was something that started me thinking in a specific direction. Yes, we had to have a war torn down to give women access to a small private liberal arts college area. It changed the focus of my career. I took then that experience and decided to move into academia. My first opportunity was at Ohio State, where I focused on gender in my research area. My first journal article was in Public Relations Review, and it was Public Relations History Misses Her Story, because I was reading and teaching public relations, and there was never anything in any of those articles or journals that mentioned anything about women. This was also, I was also going to say in 1989, just so you can see, these are the different books that I've done over my career. And the first one in 1989 was Women in Mass Communication, Challenging Gender Values. And as you can see, there's 3 editions of that. And then also I did another book that I felt was very relevant to this in 1994, Women, Media, and Sport, Challenging Gender Values. This is in the 90s, and this is where a lot of the different areas of research needed to be done to look at media coverage, the status of women in the professions in these fields, and what we needed to do to change the dynamics. One of my chapters was from whalebone to spandex. Some of you may not know, but women used to wear girdles with whalebone in them. And then at the time I was writing this, spandex was the actual outfit that women could wear when they were doing sports. Sports attire was what we were looking at. Overall, what I'm trying to get at with all of this history and all of this is that sport is actually a microcosm that encapsulates something much larger for us. That's why I looked at it, looking at gender equity, and looking at the media coverage of sport was giving a perspective on gender equity in the culture. So again, this is why you can do research in media with a focus on a specific area, and that is exactly what I was doing. Whoops, I hope I'm doing this right. Just so you know, one of my recent papers was about the social media coverage of sports. Okay, we've jumped ahead now from me getting access to a racquetball handball court, from me getting involved in doing some research and getting into academia. Well, most recently I did a paper on the 2012 Olympics in London, and it's been published since then, and I've been doing some other research, but just so you know, the London Olympics were actually dubbed as the first Olympics. They were dubbed as the first Twitter Olympics. If you can believe that, in 2012 was the first time we had, quote unquote, the Twitter Olympics. Fans and athletes use Facebook and Twitter to communicate about their memorable moments. The IOC, the International Olympic Committee, launched Olympic online communities. The IOC's Olympic Athletes Hub served as a searchable directory and had Instagram, Tumblr, live streams from Olympic Village. And the Games fully embraced online media and social media platforms. Again, this is the first time this had really happened in a major sports event. The first Olympic competition also, just so you know, believe it or not, this was the first time that every country in the Olympics had women athletes. And if you don't know, the last 3 countries in the Olympics to have women were Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Brunei. And that was, yes, thank you, there we go. The UAE had actually been in the Olympics prior to this, but the last 3 countries to bring women into there's applause for that too. The last 3 countries to bring women in. So again, I've gone one slide ahead, my apologies. So I was trying to do some research on this coverage and how, women athletes were covered. That was essentially my goal in a lot of this with the London Olympics. exploring the past. Things were eclipsing past newspaper coverage, needless to say, by using the internet, by using the web. There was 24/7 communication about what was going on in the Olympics via social media. It was a feverish news cycle. The audience used online posts to produce their own news, as you probably know. It became an international venue to produce a cutting-edge social media sport history. According to the study, more than 60% at that time, again in 2012, went online for updates about the sports. But my study reported that, needless to say, digitized, globalized media showed little improvement for the traditional coverage of women or sports. I found, however, that most of the Olympic coverage, which is traditional, was nationality-based. As all of you know, today's communication and information technologies have transformed the coverage of everything. Sports Twitter accounts now, however, will show you there's still an issue. The National Football League, these are U.S., obviously, the National Football League's Twitter account has 21, almost 22 million followers. The Women's Football Association Twitter account has 2,589 as of last night. I double-checked. The Women's National Basketball Association has 533 followers, whereas the Men's National Basketball Association has 25 million. There is one organization I just wanted to mention to you called the Association for Women in Sports Media, and they themselves now have roughly 115 members. Or excuse me, they had 115 in 1987. Today, they have 700 members. I also looked a little bit further to see in terms of what is going on with women in covering sports today. And last year, ESPN has a magazine called The Magazine, and they made a bit of sports history because they actually, for the first time, had an editor named as a woman named as the editor of the major sports magazine in the U.S. right now online that has 94.8 million readers. So that's a step ahead in our media area. Also in April, just this April, this last month, the Washington Post became the first major newspaper in the U.S. to have their four major sports with women reporters, women as the primary primary editor of those areas. That included football, basketball, baseball, and ice hockey. If you can imagine that transition from what I was telling you before. New media blogs, search engines, online newspapers, social networks, and digital content have changed the intercultural communication we have as well. New media have impacted the behavior of users, consumers, and have had an intercultural impact for us all. They have impacted the concept of consumer or user producers of digital content. New media have increased the content produced and promoted intercultural dialogue as well. And new media have increased the value of individual source contribution. I think that in of itself is a very, very interesting dynamic for all of us today. Another example, there's another thing called Sports Biz. This is for reporters that are doing business, covering sports from a business aspect, how much money and how much the economical aspects of various sports. As some of you know, some of the sports are having some difficulty. Actually, right now, U.S. football is having difficulty with viewers because people want to go on their Twitter, on a line, and just absolutely see the score immediately. They don't want to sit and watch a television show about it. But when I show you this, I look through these kinds of things. This is still something I do quite a bit. And literally, there are only 3 women in this group that are part of the sports biz operation. So essentially, that's 15% of the sports people, of the people in sports biz today even are women. In the early 1970s, there were only about 25 women were sports reporters, and that's nearly 50 years ago. But in 2011, North American sports studies showed that 94% of sports editors are men, 90% of assistant sports editors are men, 89% of reporters are men, and 84% of copy editors and designers are men. This is again in sports. So at that moment, and it certainly would be true, I'm almost positive today, between 7 and 10% of sports journalists are males. And now with our 140 character bursts, I think we are beginning to see a change. And we actually talked about that a little bit this morning, that some of you now would like to have those bursts, the Twitter bursts, even smaller. So you can do it faster, so that, 120 words might be too many, right? Yeah, I mean, 120 characters. You'd like to have it even quicker and faster. And again, this is showing us what is really happening in the field today in terms of sports coverage. And a recent study showed that female sports journalists are actually adopting a more masculine way of writing. That they also, female readers or viewers or web clickers actually are more involved than ever before because they like to know up-to-date information. But contrary to the prevalent impression that having more women in the sports media, particularly ones in sports media editor positions, might be an impetus for bringing about change, everyone is arguing that isn't happening at all. My updates I've given you on media coverage of male and female sports journalists, I now want to look a little bit more about the audience, which is what we're looking at today, much more so in the courses we're teaching in our discipline. Consumers only want content that they can consume on the phone, on the tablet, or on the computer. And interestingly, this just happened too. ESPN, the television sports network, just laid off 100 reporters on April 29th. Just laid off. And why are they doing that? Because they are saying that they're adapting its mix of TV and digital programming to Twitter, Facebook, and Snapchat age. And actually, they have 10 million subscribers over the past 5 years that have changed their interest in ESPN sports reporting to the web and to online information, to tweets. 2 years ago, ESPN actually had already laid off 300 of their reporters. So they're focusing on people. This might be important to you as you're looking in your career orientation, focusing on people that can be versatile and appear cross-platform. It is all about versatility. That is what they are looking at now. Again, my Women in Sports book that was published in 1994 needs to have a whole new focus. 217 this year, needs to have a way to look at gender values in sports and media coverage of sports. From coverage to employment and from journalists to the audience. This is what we need to look at today. This has been on my to-do list for a while. And actually having this opportunity to make this presentation, realizing it is academic for those of you that are really into everything that you're going to hear about this afternoon. But I want you to know that this presentation has really given me a feeling that it is absolutely time for a new focus, a new book about the coverage and the involvement of women in sports media. And I want to call it Women Weaving the Web, needless to say. Challenging social and cultural values. And I've already started working on some of this. Women who are internet innovators. Now, this wouldn't just be sport. This would be all of media, needless to say. But sports would be a dramatic part of it. The net generation, which is you all, and what you're looking at in terms of news on the web. Internet investors and venture capitalists, who are they? Social consumption CEOs, internet interdependence, social media doctors, bloggers, cyberbullies, and the law, information overload, overconsumption, and download dementia. Does that relate to any of you in your classes this right now? I would assume download dementia. Maybe the faculty are feeling that more than you are, I don't know. But all of these areas need to be examined more specifically. Again, my focus has always been on the differential between men and women involvement in this and what the content is that might show some disparity. So clearly, the internet has established point-to-point communication between us all. The web has weaved an interactive, instant, and international sharing of news, information, ideas, and opinions every second, every day. Maybe the female innovators in digital journalism now aren't focused on women's sports, but many may have opportunities to change and shape the coverage, which is a very exciting opportunity today. Developing individual economies of attention, it seems to be time to redefine and reconstruct the reality of sports media coverage in this new social media area. This is Sheikha Lubna, our president. She's the most powerful woman in the Arab world by another rating. She's number 42 in Forbes as the most powerful woman in the world. She's the Minister of State for Tolerance. She's our president. She was Minister of State for International Cooperation and Minister of State for Economic Planning. She's really a dynamite individual and has made so many energies and efforts in trying to change the status of women. Women's E-News is where she was given an honor, and that's why I wanted you to hear that, because again, this is part of the new media aspect of what's going on. So, do you have any questions for me while we're waiting? Yes, please.
What do you think we can do, especially for a lot of the young people here at the university, what can they do to make sure that they maintain storycraft and journalism while still being able to report effectively on time and up to the minute with digital media?
That's a very good question, needless to say. I think you may have a better answer than I do, because that's what you're involved in right now, and actually some of the students may even know the answer to that question better than I do. I think, personally, when I look online, and well, unfortunately, most of the news stories I see today about anybody that's done a tweet has to do with someone who might be the President of the United States right now. So that is the only dimension that I'm as aware of about news coverage of what's going on in tweets. Yes, I have my Twitter account. Yes, I have my Facebook account. Yes, I go on there quite a bit to see things. And there's just a lot of different blogs that I'm involved in to just kind of keep up on things. But I think the primary question is, you get an audience, you get followers when you're tweeting, whatever your tweets are about. But how do you broaden that? Is there any way we can have an intercultural, global conversation? Once upon a time, that's what the news media were all about. In other words, there would be a news story and it would be used across the world as something that we all needed to know. Now it's just getting so segmented, and all of these little pillars of people communicating with each other who have the same beliefs, even though it's international. I mean, there's one dimension that's very good, and that is it isn't country-specific anymore. It is internationally people that have the same values and concerns. But the question is, if I don't have a friend who has that information, who shares with me, I don't know what some of the issues are or what some of the major concerns should be. So what should we do? I mean, seriously, what should we do? And why, I should probably ask some of you, how many of you read a newspaper? Oh, now that's pretty impressive, actually. I was expecting one or two hands. How many of you listen to television news? A few of you. Okay, excellent. Well, actually, you're in a college where that's a priority. So maybe this is not a good. Maybe this would be a statistic that would be considered invalid. But nonetheless, I do think what you're sharing is that what you're doing is what we need to see, how we make this something that the rest of the world is interested in knowing, not just your own Twitter, not just your own Facebook, not just all of your own social media accounts. How do we make sure that global news is something that everybody's concerned in? I mean, that's a dynamite question, but I don't have a good answer. Maybe you do.
I think we can all make an answer together.
Yeah, we can all make an answer together. I think you students in this college are the critical ingredient to seeing how we change that. How do we get news values out in the real world, that an area that everybody's interested in learning about, as opposed to everybody segmenting and just staying in their own little pyramid or something like of that nature. So proud to see so many students involved in communication over here at this university. Thank you very much for this opportunity to be here. Thank you. Thank you.